actually a member of the programming staff for CONvergence. I've also been a member of the gaming staff in the past. I've run games for probably 20 years at Con of the North and for friends. Several different systems and all of that. And in fact, bit of personal trivia, I actually originally met my husband at Con of the North.
I'm Zawadzki. I've been gaming for just under 40 years now, since I was in like 4th grade. So I've been around for a bit. I've done a lot of freelance writing for primarily Onyx Path Publishing, so sort of horror-ish stuff. Yeah, done a little bit of development work for them as well. So.
My name is Alex Bender. I've been involved in gaming since like 1990, I would say, something in that range. I've played all sorts and consulted around game systems and things along those lines, but I've played, my primary system is Werewolf, Vampire, OG. That was the one that really spun it up for me, was Werewolf First Edition, but before that I played D&D and Battletech and tactical games, things like this. I bought the first Magic deck in my games. Weird, stupid things like this.
I'm Kenneth Justiniano. I'm 55, and I've been gaming since I was 10. Back in those days, we didn't know what a DM was. So I've been DMing since then. So.
Well, DM?
Do you know what a DM is?
Now? Sometimes.
It's the person that tries to kill your character, right? At least that's my experience back then.
Actually, my usual description is cat herder.
Yes.
I never try to kill your character. I always put it that way. It's like, it's not my intentional thing.
Death is a release, not a punishment? Is that? I'm being flip. Don't kill your players' characters. You will drive away people out of the hobby. That's really fun. That's not our goal here.
Although there are times when you really do need to, though.
Yes.
Yeah. There is such a thing as natural consequences.
I once had a colleague who was in a game with me who quit the game after she had her character leap from a ledge to a rope over an abyss, rolled a critical failure, and then didn't understand why she was dead. So, yeah. So to begin with tips for game masters, I think the first question to ask is, what should you not do as a game master?
Plan.
What?
Honestly,
And we have our first dispute.
in my years of playing, I do not plan anymore. I set up a scenario, and I've got a goal that I want for them to reach. I got the bad guy in mind that I want to develop, because he's not even fully fledged, because it's going to be pulled out of how they react. And then, hopefully, a bunch of other people. If they're willing to go with me on this crazy ride, we'll have fun.
Okay. I work in the exact opposite way. I'm a software engineer by trade, so I think of things in systems and modules. So as a writer, I'm not a pantser, but I improvise very well. So like you, I'll start with what's my big vibe, or what's the conflict or the theme, and who are my players, and I will have modules that I want as they go. The setting might be flexible, the timing might be flexible, but I plan out what do I want out of those scenes. And from that perspective, like I use the five-room dungeon at every scale. And if you don't know what the 5-room dungeon is, you see this in writing, you see this in GMing and things like this. It's basically you have an entrance point, you have a puzzle, you have a role-playing challenge, you have a conflict, and you have a resolution. I do this at every layer like a snowflake. So every scene looks like that, every session looks like that, every year looks like that, and depending on where I want my campaign to go. So I use that is my plan, 5-room dungeon, all the time. at everything. But that's not.
I would say, as a GM, don't be afraid to let things get silly from time to time. Sometimes the players just need that break. And that's okay.
I think the watershed moment for me was I realized that it was a collaborative process. And my players and they will almost come up with the plots with me, come up with the scenarios with me. And if you let them do the silly things, they will just lean into the tropes, they will follow right along. I run and write mostly horror games. And when you think about horror, and watching horror, the characters know much less than the creator of the horror show, but the audience knows more than the characters. And when you are running a role-playing game that is horror, the players are not the characters, the players are the audience, and they are the ones that are yelling, "Don't go in the attic," and then making their characters go up in the attic anyway. So, like, if your players know what you're getting at, and then something they want to do and want to see, then they will go along with you. You do not have to be all secretive and rub your hands together and twirl a mustache to get them to go along with it. In fact, you'll find that it's easier to get the game to go the way maybe you wouldn't expect per se, but at least in the general direction of what you want, if you don't try to hide too much of what you're doing behind the curtain.
So to honor the question though, what not to do, respect the players' boundaries, right? And they talked about this at the diversity in gaming panel a lot, right? So know what the game, is it a PG-13 game? Is it an R game? Is there slavery? Is there not slavery? Are there people of color? Is there racism? Is there not racism, right? The tropes are there for a reason, but sometimes the tropes come from not the healthiest places, right? So don't push your players' boundaries unless they ask you to.
How about show of hands, how many people are familiar with the idea of a session zero? Okay. For those who might not know, session zero is where you meet before the game even starts, before you even are really setting up the game or setting up the characters, to discuss everything from logistics, where are we going to meet, how often are we going to meet, are we going to eat during, after, before, not at all, what are our boundaries, what sort of things do we definitely not want in the game, what kind of things do we want in the game, and having those discussions before the game starts will save you all sorts of problems that are avoidable. Like, if you decide that you're running a horror game and you want something to be involved, like, kidnapping orphans, children, and you want to build up to this over the course of several sessions, and then you get to that moment and you start doing it, and one of the players is just like, this makes me really uncomfortable. That's not the time to have that come up if possible. It's better to say, oh no, nothing involving children, please. I don't want it. I don't want that agreement to go there. And then you can just exclude it easily enough. You don't end up wasting a whole bunch of effort on something you have to discard.
And to go along with that, right? So yes, and that. I had a GM, was one of the few times I got to play. He's like, I want to run Cyberpunk, and I want it to be X-rated, where session zero was, we're no holds barred kind of a thing. Come up with your characters. So his players 5, I was one of them. We came up, each of us were psychotic in our own ways. And if you've even played the video game, it was not more than that. But session 1 squicked him out. He never had a session 2. And we were all disappointed, like, we could run this game, any of us could run this game, but you wanted this.
And that's knowing your triggers.
Yeah, he didn't know his own triggers and wanted it. Yeah, he got what
That's lovely. That is extremely lovely. For me, part of session zero for me is the contract. The contract is where you spell out hard. These are the stops. These are the fails. These are the goes. These are no goes. And the reason that you do that is to build trust within the group. The more trust you have, the crazier you can get because people will not balk at it. But as soon as you do that cringe thing, the group will dissolve because they won't come back.
There was one time I was running a pre-published adventure from a Pathfinder adventure path, and there was one portion of it that I knew would be a hard no-go for one of my players. So I just changed it up a bit so that instead of the bad thing happening to a young child, it happened to a young adult instead. And it did not materially change the story. It did not materially alter the adventure, but it respected something that I knew would not be a good thing for her and would in fact be very triggering. You can do things like that. You just have to know, like others were saying, what the no-goes are for your players and be willing to be a little creative to respect those.
All good answers. Another idea is, what is an ideal duration? Oh, you have a question? Yes? Please.
Yeah. How do you negotiate? Like, you've just told stories of how someone's trigger, they didn't even know it. So how do you negotiate when the triggers change mid-campaign? So you've already gotten to that place, and then someone's like, I don't like this, but it's already
No,
there.
The two most common strategies we have seen are what they call lines and veils and the X card. Lines and veils is when you say up front, these are the things I don't mind them. The veils are the things I don't mind including as long as it doesn't get explicit. You can say yeah, and then they interrogate this person and leave off that. No gory mention of the details of torture. A line is where no interrogate, like no torture is even referenced. So that's one strategy when you say it up front. X card is when you develop some means of communicating with the GM or with other players that something is making you uncomfortable. A literal card that has an X on it where you point at it is one, but really anything that communicates that, respectfully and with and maturely is fine. Just as long as those are the two most common strategies I've heard of.
So I want to push back a little or add to this. What the question I heard, correct me if I'm wrong, is what do you do after the line has been crossed, whether it's been known or unknown? Is that the question that you
Yeah,
asked?
sort of, like sometimes the dice push that line.
Yeah,
You're at a line where it is a veil, and the dice just don't go in anyone's favor, so they keep being stuck in that place that it should have been a veil, but because of, the players continuously rolling under a high.
if you're really role playing, this is a perfect opportunity to build some trauma into the character. If it's trauma to the player, what you want the player, you have to give your players the ability to stop, and that has to be spelled out at even pre-zero. I mean, when you first talk to them about joining your game. I have a very open rule in my house where it's like, all you have to do is stand up and say no, and we stop right then and there. You have to give your players the autonomy to stop the session. And, if it entails you and then leaving the room and having a conversation, or having a conversation with the whole group, but talking it over before moving forward. A lot of times when it's failed miserably is because you steamroll ahead and don't take anyone's considerations.
Yeah, the ideal is, if when possible, talk about it before it happens. If failing that, address it or at least stop it while it is happening. And then sometimes you don't even realize that you were squicked out by something until after the fact. Be mature, talk about it afterwards, figure out how to make it work or avoid that in the future.
In his situation, I would bet that he did not figure it out until way after. Because it's like you probably played to the end of the first session, but there never was a second.
Yep, there was just never a second. Yeah.
And that's when the thing stays with the person in their head where they can't get it out and they're like, no, I ain't touching it.
The RPG consent checklist.
Yeah, which is basically like a pre-fill that has like extremely common triggers that like people might want to address, that has a whole bunch of blanks. And it has kind of a red, yellow, green kind of check boxes for people to do. And so if you're about to run a campaign, you know, there's potentially triggering content, you can kind of pre-fill it in there. Hey everyone, these are the sorts of content that I'm expecting to be in the game. What do you think about this? And then look at everybody's thing, you just kind of like, you know, least common denominator. Okay, we've got at least one person who wants to see more available on this, or you can address it that way. So those are a little bit more granular, rather than everybody needing like think of every bad thing that's
Yeah.
ever happened to them. Which can make lines and veils like a really unpleasant experience.
Because you're kind of triggering yourself just talking about it in advance.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, I can
that
address
worst case
that.
scenario elements aren't actually there.
Yeah, I think for WordCamp reasons, I've never had an opportunity to write a big list in a game book, but I can see the advantage.
Also, the GM is a player, they're just a player, and safety mechanics for them too, they're outnumbered. So safety mechanics and X cards and things like that are really, really useful for a GM. And a good way to model the behavior you want to see from players, especially during safety pools, is to use them yourself.
Yeah.
Another line of questioning that I've got is, what, in your experience, is the ideal duration for a campaign? And how do you know when a campaign is over? And how do you know when a campaign is not over?
I mean, I could start with that. I've run campaigns that, you know, were just basically long one-shots, and I've run campaigns that had lasted years. When I ran the LARP in Los Angeles, that was a 2-year real-time vampire werewolf mage LARP. We were done when my storytelling staff, I had 14 co-storytellers, when we were done. And we basically had the Savat take over the city. Now we were already Savat in the city, but it was a whole thing. So for me, it happened when the campaign story, what was the story I was trying to tell? What was the experience that I wanted to share with my players, right? As an author, I have a point to what I'm trying to do. As a storyteller, or a GM, or a DM, what are the key things that I'm looking for, right? Is this the theme? Is the theme betrayal? Is the theme, hey, we're gonna do BSG and fantasy? Like, what are we doing? And so I'll say, okay, well, we're done with this story arc. We can keep going with those same people, but it's going to be a new campaign. Maybe switch out half the players, things like this. So, for example, we had a campaign that started at the beginning of COVID with online, and it ended about 3 years later. And then we did a one-shot, the werewolf, completely changed the flavor of it. And then we went back to the same world, same players, different characters, different campaign, because they loved that world. Like, we want to go back to Nestor, we want to go back. So, that's my answer.
Here at CONvergence for the last 15 years, I've been running a game called Simplicity. At the very beginning, a certain group of players came together to play the initial game, and they played it for 10 years. They would religiously come back, and at least in one session during CONvergence, we'd all get together and play. 10th year, they actually came to a conclusion, which was somebody did a fabulous botch in the game system. And we all at the same time turned and it's like, okay, so it rebooted, this rebooted to the very beginning where we were all brought in and everybody's like, this is the end. And we all walked away. You know, the stories have their own conclusion points. The other thing Simplicity does that most others don't is it asks the character, what is the goal? I used to do this in D&D, outside of the parameters of the game. And when I created this system, it's like, no, it is a fundamental part of it. I need a goal for it. And when your character reaches the goal, I will ask you, do you want to keep playing? You know, and a lot of characters have decided, no, you know what? He's happy. He can go off and, retire. He doesn't have to be adventuring But it gives a conclusion, something that a lot of gamers don't ever get the opportunity to do.
I think it obviously depends on the game and what I'm doing. Like if I'm doing a one-shot, I'm doing a one-shot. But I have a tendency to play games that run around, I don't know, a year, a little more than a year, just simply because that's about my attention span, and I know it. And in that amount of time, I can introduce a central mystery at the beginning, and then when I finally get a point where I can find a resolution for it, I'm happy, and the players are happy. There was one time where we were running a mage game, and they were given a sanctum, a place where they could hang out by the local like mage orders that had like some weird mysterious history. It was like had like 1970s carpeting, and it was just like, why did we get this house? And there was a closet they couldn't open at all, no matter what they did. And you know, they were doing other things that had nothing to do with that. But when they finally realized what the central mystery was, this was discovered that the reason they were given this house was because they had been, it was a time loop, and this was already their sanctum before, and now it's their sanctum again. And so once we resolved the central mystery of, okay, there's a time travel plot here, and then we did like this one little plot after that, we knew it was done. It didn't need to be there. Believe me, I didn't have any idea there was a time travel plot when I came up with it, because I like sandboxes. I come up with a whole bunch of random plot hooks before the game even starts. Different factions, different settings, plot hooks, characters, and then I just see what the players do, and just sort of like pull quarters out of people's ears until it's done, until I figure out what's going on. And that's just my style of playing. My wife, on the other hand, is very much a plotter, and she runs games that are 3 or 4 years long and has a very clear idea of this is the first arc, this is the second arc, in very general terms. And then she knows her players super well. She knows what is going to make them excited, what they're going to follow. And so she can introduce a plot hook and go, Nikki's going to love this NPC and is going to chase that person to get this to Earth, and we'll eventually get their backstory. Because we've been playing together for 20 years. So I think it really just depends on the game and on the personality of the GM and on the interest level of the players.
So I just wanted to ask each one of you, what are some of your favorite twists that you've run personally in your own games? Like for me, for example, I was quite a loss that there's walking in, they see dozens of their own corpses, and they've already fought this distinct time loop.
Over and over
They've
again.
fought it like 20 times already, and I just see like, okay, and they piece together like how needed based on, you know, what they see. I was just wondering, like, what were some of your favorite rules in your own games?
The one that I love most is I sent the party off to go acquire a princess. What they didn't know is that they were working for the bad guy. And they thought that the lord that they were working for was a stand-up guy, that he was, doing everything to save the girl, that he was being protective. And these were all, knightly characters that were playing on this. They should have known that if they're playing with me, it was gonna go dark. They end up finally, once they get the princess and they hand her over, he just slits her throat. And it went dark. And everybody in the room their jaw just dropped. And they're like, you son of a... And all the work, they almost died like 5 times during this campaign. And they finally get her to where they're supposed to in one piece. And she is taken. And they're like, yes, it worked.
I've had a bunch, so there's not.
Yeah, it's hard to just pick one, right?
Yeah, it's just one. This isn't less of a twist and more of like an ooh moment. And the ooh moment for me that really stands out, I was running a werewolf game with 2 packs, so it was a big game, like 10 players. And it was because not all the players could make it, so sometimes both packs were involved, sometimes it was one, sometimes it was right? But I had it very fleshed out. It was werewolf. It was 1400s. The pack had a castle. There was another castle with a vampire, right? So the pack was constantly dealing with the vampires, minions, and stuff like that. When they kept coming back to the elders, the one who always talked was the Philodox. So they thought the Philodox was in charge. It doesn't matter the names of it. Basically, he was actually the number 2 guy. And there was always this giant wolf laying by the fireplace, and then something happened where these 2 packs collapsed. It was a big climax with the in-player, it almost turned player versus player, right? The alphas were at each other's throats, blah, blah, blah. And then that wolf woke up and just growled across the room. And suddenly you realize the giant silver fang Arun, for those who understand what werewolf is, like basically pure blood, giant, he will kill you. Oh, and that blade, that giant sword on the wall, that was his. So yeah, that was it. We had 2 like the players weren't really into it, so their characters were really into it. There was a lot of excitement, and they were at each other's throat at the table. And then the growl rolls across the room, and they're like, oh shit. We built up the real alpha. The Philodox was the beta who just liked doing all the time.
So I was fortunate enough to game with Professor M.A.R. Barker for a long time, and he wrote several novels set in his world of Tecumseh, all well and good. And so we're gaming with him, and we're doing our thing, and all of a sudden the undead swarm up from below the imperial palace, and the emperor is overthrown, and the undead worshipping son usurps the role of emperor. And then when that happened to us, we realized he foreshadowed it all in his first novel. It was all right there. We'd all read it. We'd read it multiple times. It basically was a novel full of big arrows that said usurper coming, undead here, and we were still completely blindsided by it. So I wasn't the GM in that case, but that was, one of these places where you're like, oh, he's really good at what he does.
I was running a D&D adventure that the basic idea was to give the player characters a chance to interact with regular people. So they're back in a PC's home village for a relative's wedding. And my husband's paladin goes off to cure this lady of this disease. And I'm thinking, isolated village, high charisma paladin that just did something heroic. Teenage girls.
Oh no.
So I had him roll a couple of spot checks to see if he noticed his little gaggle of followers.
Congratulations, you've just started anime.
Meanwhile, the bard notices,
Of course.
says nothing. And they're in the inn for dinner that night, surrounded by every village family with a teenage girl. The other players teased him about this in character for years.
As they should have.
So, yeah, that was a favorite.
Now, a relatively recent one. So I had a player, we were playing a D&D Renegades game, which is about science experimenters who escaped and want their revenge. Although this was our coded game. And one of the players decided to take complete amnesia and a very low-level alternate persona, because the game runs on scars, which was a bad thing to have in your character. I was looking at the character sheet, because that's one of the things I do when I'm starting a game, is I look at everyone's character sheet, not just because I want to see what the overall holds, but looking for the weird stuff. What did you include in your character that doesn't quite fit? How can I use it? If you have a specialty in Babylonian priesthood lore, I'm going to find an opportunity for you to use it before the game is over. And one of the ones he had like 3 dots of firearms and a specialty of sniper rifles. And I'm like, you're a stand-up comic. Why do you have this? But rather than vetoing this, I'm like, okay, why does he have 3 dots of firearms and a specialty in sniper rifles? And I came up with this whole thing of he was an assassin, and his whole like shtick or his method of doing this was the wizards who had sent him to assassinate people would completely wipe his mind and give him a completely different personality so that he could get close to the target. And when he got close enough to the target, he would remember that that's the person he was going to target and kill him. And at some point, he had done this so many times, and he was just like begging, please, I don't want to do this anymore. Like, I've killed so many people, I've done my job for you, I want to retire. And so what they did was they made him, they basically took one of the roles that he used a lot, which was the stand-up comic, and said, okay, this is now your dominant personality, and so now your assassin personality is just to sit in the back row and enjoy life. And the stand-up comic has no idea who he is, where he came from, other than I'm a stand-up comic, you know. And until the day that he encountered someone who knew about him and was going to try to kill him, and had the tables turned, and the alternate persona said, no, and managed to grab some weapons and kill this guy right in the middle of the church before he could get killed. And so like that's like one of the, again, looking at the character sheets is just such a great way of, the character sheet is players communicating to you as a GM what they want the game to have. Like if they have a lot of combat skills, usually means, especially at the beginning, usually it means that they want to see some fights. They want to be good at this. They want to put their skills to use. If they have amnesia, they really just want me to make them suffer. At least that's my opinion.
Centering your name around the characters, moving their sheets and their backstories, and building out from that into your plot is
There's a reason my session zeros are months before the actual session starts, because that takes that time. You can take the character sheet, I have a basic pitch, take the character sheet, and I take some time to like build up everything around the characters, and then arrange all the pieces so that they'll be interesting to interact with.
Simplicity has a system where one of the first things that you answer or do is answer 10 questions. One of the questions in there is, what's your goal? And one of them is, what's your greatest fear? Those 2 things fuel the GM, the storyteller's story powerfully. The other thing that it does is it forces the person creating the character to really think thoroughly about what it is that they're trying to create. The other thing that it does is it uses a flaw system. People can take flaws to boost other attributes. And if you take really heavy flaws, if you take a creature that is extremely powerful, they're going to have more flaws. If you want to be a high demon, what are going to be your flaws? Because you're going to start off with a bunch of them. And it forces people to invest more time in character creation.
Yes.
I just have a question. So, how do you avoid GM burnout? Because something I do, I find myself having done a couple times is I come up with a campaign, I assemble it, and I throw myself into it, and then I get burned out by the second session, and I get bored of what I've done just because I don't know, I get so in my own head about it, and then I just hate creative burnout. And I don't know. Do you have any tips for managing longer campaigns and stuff like that?
Well, it helps to be married to another GM. By which I mean, my husband and I actually have taken turns each running our own Pathfinder campaign, so that neither of us has to GM every time. So if you have someone else who might be interested in GMing at least occasionally, you know, that can be a way to help manage things where, okay, I don't have to think about all that stuff this time. I can just relax and be a player and let them deal with it. But that can be one way, is finding someone else who is interested at least sometimes.
I think another piece of it is what is it that is making it hard to come to that game again? Like if you are not really a heavily mechanics person and you're running a game that's extremely mechanics heavy, like it just takes hours to just stat out everything, and if that's the thing that's burning you out, it may be better to pick a game that is a little lighter on that, or if that's something you dig and the game you've been running just is not scratching that itch, because remember you're still a player too, and what you're going to enjoy is going to be a big piece of it. Adding on to the having another person, something my wife has found incredibly helpful, and she's been running games for a very long time, honestly a better GM than I am, is that she has a friend in Australia who she just bounces ideas off of and has for 25 years. We record our sessions, he listens to them, he comes up with stuff to add to the game, and it makes it a lot easier. She has someone to talk about what she's doing who isn't directly a player. And then she had another friend of ours who she was really good at mechanics, at making baddies, and loved doing that. And so when Beth was like, I just need some villains who are basically in this range, Jace would be just like, yeah, sure, sign me up. I'll give you these 5 people. They're all, they're optimized in just the right way. This is why they're going to be interesting to deal with them. And so when encounters happen, a lot of the work was taken off her plate. So having a community to help you bounce ideas or build stuff from is just super, super helpful. But also just know what it is what's hard and what it is that knocks you out. I know myself, most of my energy is at the beginning of the game. That's why you hear me talk about sandbox game and session 0 being so far before the actual game starts and so forth. Is because I will spend all this time prepping, because a year down the line, I don't really want to spend 2 hours on a Saturday prepping for the game, or 4 hours on a Saturday prepping for a game. I'm kind of just done. I just want to run itself. And if I prep well enough, not really plan, but prep well enough, I know I can improvise the rest. You have to kind of know what it is that is the struggle before you can really solve the problem.
The other thing is, you're the GM. You can throw in just BS sessions along the way. Most of the time, that I found, when I'm getting stuck in one of those situations, it's kind of like in anime, you get the
Catch-up episodes?
yes, the beach episodes, the going to the hot springs. It's a palate cleanser. And what you'll find is that when you're doing that palate cleanser, you'll be given ideas of how to screw those characters over. I am not physically going after them. Their actions in the world do.
I know for myself, one of the things I had to realize was what was making me anxious and how was I addressing it as a GM. And what was making me anxious is I wanted to be perfect, and I didn't want to have any gaps or flaws or vulnerabilities in my game. And so I over-prepared to the point where I burned out. And so what I had to do is I had to start a discipline of myself going, you know what? It's gonna be okay. I can wing this, it's gonna be okay. And that for me was a real important step, because it allowed me to approach my games a little more relaxed. And it always was okay. There was never anybody who died because I didn't prepare my game well enough. So.
When I was creating Simplicity, I was going through a real hard time trying to figure out, how do I create this system where anyone from any other, fantasy game can bring their character in and play it. And I was doing, crazy math and trying to figure out tables, and just, spent about a year and a half trying to figure this out. A friend of mine looks at me during, one of our sessions when we're talking about it, and this is where you need that tribe of people that you can trust. He looks at me and goes, why? Why are you doing this? And he's like, yeah, it's kind of cool that you take a Grubs character and put it in here, or you can take, a werewolf character and put it in here. But your game is 3 stats. Screw them. They can bring any character you want to create into your game, have them tweak it so that it's, based on the 3 stats, and just have fun with it. The other thing that he showed me was that you need to just go with the fun. It's like we spend so much time trying to make it perfect, trying to make it so that everybody's going to have a good time. And Mark really refocused me into thinking, it's about the laughs. You want to get around the table, you want to get laughs, and you want to have a good time.
Yeah,
Do not make the perfect the enemy of the good.
So to go with this, I'm going to use 2 points that I use, right? One is to yes and that, right? Go with the fun. So what is it that you like about your game that brings you back? The problem might not be you. The problem might be your players. If I, as an archetype, am a role-playing actor type, but my players are all mechanics, min-maxers, fighters, they don't want to be at my game. Because the game that I want them to play is not the game they want to play. So find a new group. The other thing, talking to the community part, I will swear by roleplayingtips.com. I've been part of John Forrest's community for decades now. And he is up there in the giant pillars of the role-playing community. He's got Zoom calls once a month. He's got an OG bulletin board style conversation forums. He's got a Patreon. He's been doing this a long time. He literally has decades and decades and decades of tips and tricks and of all sorts of things. So if you want a good community that you want to bounce ideas off of and you don't have anybody close to you, go there.
Yeah, I would also say, look at the type of game that you're running and think about introducing a session where you don't have to work as much. Push your players at a party and I have to achieve objective X, whatever that is, and just get them doing something different and get them to explore different parts of their characters and personalities, or run a one-shot of something else. I mentioned that I typically run games that come out of the north, as well as sessions with a regular group, and I find that I will often do things in a convention one-shot that I wouldn't do with my regular group, just because I don't think that they would enjoy the particular thing that I'm doing. It's just not their style. But it can be really refreshing for me to have that change of tone and change of pace.
I mean, Beth, my wife is a planner, as I mentioned, and believe me, there are times when it's like everyone had the flu this week. I did not have time to plan a session and just run with something. Like she comes up with some silly scenario, and sometimes it just gives us time to think about what our characters are, who our characters are, how we interact with each other. There was a conflict between one of my character and the captain of the ship in a Firefly game. And there was some hallucination session that we ended up having. It was like, that kind of session. And so it was very silly and very ridiculous, but at the same time, it also let our characters interact with each other in a way where we couldn't have done it if we weren't hallucinating, but it really gave some context around that relationship. And Beth didn't really need to do much at all during that, to prep for that session. She just said, yeah, I guess there's like some hallucinations that happen because something wacky happens with the life support system. And we'll just go from there. But it was a very silly session, it was a very fun session, and it did not require a lot of work. And we did actually develop our characters quite nicely.
I see you here, I'll get you in a second. I do have a trauma that I lived through that taught me a lot. over 20 years ago at Yukon, Michigan, Ann Arbor, Michigan, one of the people running the con walked up to me and said, "Cool, we're looking forward to your LARP tonight." And I said, "What's a LARP?"
Bring out the unicorn.
And I don't know how this happened, but I had somehow been assigned to create a LARP for that evening. And I had about 3 hours, and I didn't even know what a LARP was at that point. And so they said, well, this is basically what a LARP was. And so I was like, okay, smoke started coming out of my brain. And what I did, right, is like, how many people? It was like 24 people or more. And so what I did was I just made up a grid. And the grid was the character, their primary, their external goal, someone told them to go get this. Their internal goal, they personally wanted to do this other thing. And then, not that they're aware of it, but who is opposing them, right? Who has an external goal that conflicts with theirs? Who has an internal goal that conflicts with theirs? And then, random thing about themselves. And I just populated that grid. That's all I did in the 3 hours that I had. And so I had one person in love with another person, and this person who was in love with a third person, and the third person hated that first person, and none of them knew this. And that was all I got. And it was wonderful. It was probably the best LARP I've ever attended. At one point, I'm standing here, and I've got the guy who is in love with the girl, and the girl is in love with this guy, but this guy's external goal was to assassinate this guy, and this girl's internal goal was to protect this guy, but she didn't know this was the guy she was supposed to protect. She hadn't figured that out yet. And so they were all chatting with each other, and I could just see the little tendrils working. I'm like, oh, this works. And I learned a lot from that. That was, let me get here and then here.
So that does actually be very nicely to my question. Which is just how, it can just be so hard to tell how much prep is enough. And it feels, for you, it's very minimalistic, but between tokens, mapping, and figuring out.
Please do not mistake me going in with minimal expectations, with me not being, I've got worlds, I've got stacks of data that, populate my world. My wife is like, you're constantly growing, constantly changing, constantly creating monsters. No, that's all in here so that I can use it. When I show up, I don't expect too much.
So the right answer is what is right for you.
Yep.
And what works for you. If I need to spend an hour, then spend an hour. Right? I use the 5-room dungeon, so therefore I know I have basically a mental template. And sometimes the year-long resolution has one word on it. Right? Tachesis. That's it. How am I getting there? I don't know.
What is
But
it?
that is the big fight. They're going to fight Tachesis because this is War of the Lands. Fine. Okay. So, it's what works for you. Sometimes I have 15 minutes. So how do I best spend that 15 minutes? All right, I start going through and I start collecting my tokens or I start drawing my map because that's as much time as I can. Because I can bullshit the rest of my way through, right? Sometimes I need a big speech. That's my 15 minutes, right? Other times I have weeks.
And always remember, no GM plan survives contact with the player.
System has a role to play too. If you're playing something that has a lot, it takes a lot to build an antagonist, a lot of work to do that, then that's going to take longer. If you have to do the maps, and I am not a graphic designer, and I bounced off of various map making softwares a million times because I just am not good at that particular piece of things. I can't make things look pretty. But I'm totally okay sketching something out on a piece of graph paper and figuring it out from there, and then on a whiteboard once it gets to the table. But if I'm running a game that's very lightweight in terms of mechanics and it's very much more theater of the mind, it might take me a lot less time to do it. And as I alluded to, a lot of my prep, or at least my preparation, not planning, a lot of my preparation happens before, and as I kind of come up with ideas, like sort of jot them down, and then I just, whenever the popcorn slows down a little bit, I throw another plot hook in there and see what they like. And then it just keeps moving, and I don't have to think about it too hard. But it's just really hard to just say this is how long it takes. When I was running a 4th ed game, it usually did take me about 2 hours. And they had good tools for creating antagonists, but it did take me about 2 hours to prep. But I was making combats, I was making tacticals. So I needed a map, I needed monsters, I needed some idea of like what the strategy was going to be, was the hook of the fight, and that took time. Whereas sometimes if I'm running, last week we started in this like weird Olympics in the Exalted game that we were doing. But we already started this, we know it's an ongoing story. I might not need to prep much at all because we already have everything's already in motion. Because we already have an idea what's going to happen.
As a real quick follow-up, planning versus prepping, what would you say is the line there?
For me, when I think about planning, I think about my wife. When she sits down and she's like, Eric, I need you to give me like 2 or 3 hours. I'm going to go over to the brewery and like, I'm going to get my game ready. And she will say, okay, she's like thinking about what the antagonist is for that session, what is the plot for the session, what are the little moving pieces that are going to hook the various players into things, how does it fit into the overall strategy, how am I going to incorporate the stuff that my co-GMs came up with. And like she'll have a really clear idea of exactly what's going to happen, start to finish, with some flexibility of if they don't bite on this, but they bite on this, I can still bring in this thing that was originally planned for this. That's planning. That's really well organized. When I talk about preparation, it's if the players don't know what to do next, what do I do? Preparation is having some way forward in a pitch for me. Because like I said, I pull quarters out of people's ears in games. That's how I play.
Curiously, for me, when I think about setting up a game, I also think about Eric's wife. You had a question?
Yeah, just to build on the conversation, usually when I'm running a game, we'll have like 3 oh shit moments. Like maybe a body falls out of the sky on someone's car, or like someone throws a vestigial head on their shoulders. We'll see you next time. I'm just wondering, like my question is, I guess, how do you approach keeping players engaged?
Spotlight. I have a rotating spotlight, and I make sure that every scene has a spotlighted character, and that's where the 5 convention helps when I have a diversity of players. Who is the player that I'm going to spotlight? That doesn't mean their character is the one doing the thing, but if I've got a puzzler, then I make sure there's a puzzle in scene 2.
Kind of went back to Eric's point.
Yeah,
Character sheets.
exactly. And not just character sheets, but the archetype of the player, right?
Yeah.
In 3rd edition and 4th edition, they had these ideas of archetypes of players, right? You have the actor, you have the storyteller, you have the min-maxer, etc. There's a few of these archetypes, right? Union stuff just focused on union, or pick your, because it's generic enough, it's not fantasy specific. But I rotate my spotlight, and I make sure, okay, Donna's going to get this, and Eric's going to get this, and so I make sure that player is spotlighted in some way, at least one, as I rotate through my. Now, sometimes the scene takes the whole session, right? I've had sessions where they're sitting around the campfire for 3 hours. Great, good character. That's what I.
Now I don't have to plan next
Now I
week.
don't have to plan. But I have a focus. Who gets spotlighted? What archetype am I fulfilling? What players need am I fulfilling? And how do I rotate, right? The combat guy, he gets his in the big fight. The puzzle guy gets his in figuring out how the hell do we get into the arena to fight the big bad. That's his spotlight. And so finding what is the spotlight and that's how I make sure that everybody gets involved and nobody feels left out.
So like, sorry.
I was just gonna, I'm 101.
Yeah.
I've never done it before.
Yep.
And plenty of people want to start, I encourage you to start.
Yep.
Resources, places to look at, podcasts to listen to.
Roleplayingtips.com.
Just, okay, that's.
That is, there are so many things that you go from there. There's lots of things, but he's been doing it for a long time and he has resources available. If you're looking for map making and things like this, there's a laundry list of links that I can help send you with if you want to.
And also think about GMs that you have played with as a player. You know, what did they do that you liked? What did they do that you disagreed with or didn't like?
Can you reach back to them?
There is,
Use the system that you like, not the system that you're best at.
I gamed with Professor Margaret, and over the years there have been 4 game systems for TechML, which I could name, but I'm not going to. But we didn't use any of them. He rolled some dice, and it was high, it was bad, and it was low, it was good, and that was it.
Amber?
Well,
You don't roll dice at all there.
So use the system you like.
Whatever explain testers.
For Amber.
Yes.
Uh,
Basic line is, what should do it?
and understand, you will mess up. That's okay.
It will be okay.
But the truth is, have a conversation with your players. One of the things that I like to do to keep them engaged, after the session, there's the brag session.
Yeah.
Adults have a hard time with this because they're like, okay, you know, oh, I can give you 1 point for this, or I can give you 1 point for that. Kids get it. This is a time when I can give my friends points, and this is a time where I can give myself some points beyond just the value of the adventure. And it's one of those where, if as adults, when they start doing it, at first it's difficult. Later on, it becomes a lot easier, and it becomes a lot more memorable. Because it's like, you start focusing on, well, Bill did that when he took out the Minotaur with the 1 hit. That was just amazing. But Bob's flop, where he fell off the dragon, that was the winner of this section.
So like, I use keeping to like, playing to players' strengths.
Yes.
Also, I just wanted to add on, like, if the tank wants to tank, throw 100 goblins out of the boat, just, you know, plants the close off. So,
Yeah.
I block maybe, for example.
Let him play Cuisinart.
Is that?
Let him play Cuisinart.
I work in software and I use agile principles in my game. So between every chapter, so usually 3 or 4 game sessions, we have a retro. What did you like? What didn't you like? What worked well? What didn't work well? What's something you want to experiment? Let's show up a half hour earlier and shoot the shit. We're playing online, right? So let's get that half hour so that we can jump right in and start. Or maybe we just start that half hour. You know, so retros, I use the same retros I use at work because it works.
Yeah, because a lot of, especially when you're just starting a group, it's about building trust and building like trust between you and the players and between the players. Like we can do some wild betrayals in our group now because we've been playing together for 20 years, and like it doesn't surprise us, it doesn't shock us if we don't feel like we as players are betrayed because we're playing in the genre convention. So we had one of my gamers, he was playing it when we all had dark secrets. And his dark secret was he had an evil twin. And he was the captain of our ship. And his evil twin took over, and nobody knew about it for like 8 or 10 sessions. And it was just like, why is everything going so pear-shaped? Why is he being so nice to us, but everything is going wrong? And when the reveal came out, it was shocking, but it was delightful. And you can't get away with that if the players don't trust each other, because of a traitor within plot, when you don't know each other, feels like a mean gotcha or just like being a jerk. But if there's a trust built between the players and the GM, it's fine.
It's one of the things that I constantly say. Anybody can be a dick. But to be truly evil, you have to have purpose. You know, and it's one of those things, you can have, like, you know, there's always someone in your party that wants to be the antagonist. That, you know, everybody wants to go left, he wants to go right. You know, that kind of shit. And if you're just doing that just to do it, you're being a dick. But if you're doing it because you're trying to, you know, force this kind of overthrow to this other government, makes you evil and it makes you a lot more interesting. But again, you have to have the buy-in of the group before you can actually pull something like that off. Otherwise, you're going to get shot.
And we're at time, so before we wrap up, does anyone have anything they want to push? For example, I'm in Would I Lie to You at 7 p.m. Not that I'm saying there. Please join us. And of course, Vilification Tennis tonight at 10. What else have we got here?
Board games, designs, do's and don'ts. And I have my game at 10 o'clock in Boundary Waters CE. Want to come check it out?
I've already mentioned the website. I am a patron, but I don't run on that. I'm not John. I'm going to be at the moderating the systems talk on Sunday. So if you want to talk setting versus system, then coming in and can talk more focused conversations rather than generic storyteller stuff. Let's talk about systems versus how your setting can help or how your system can help or hurt your setting.
Well, since I'm on the convention committee, I think I am contractually obligated to say, please volunteer even for an hour or so. You have no idea how much it helps. Yes, and also tomorrow night at 10:30, Bob and I will both be on the panel engaging in flagrant abuse of the English language.
I'm on Evolution tabletop games on Sunday morning, for those who are still sticking around a little bit. I'm findable on social media under my first and last name. Just as a caveat, there is a comic book artist who is amazing, but is not me. It has my first and last name. So that he usually shows up on Google well ahead of me. He's a little bit more successful in a lot of ways. But I am findable, and I have games I write or write for, and can be located there. So.
Yeah, and I am not the musical director of the $64,000 Name That Tune from the 1970s. That's not the Bob Alberti you're looking for.
It's funny though, like if you're a John Smith and you meet another John Smith, or someone else meets another John Smith, they don't assume that John Smith is you. But if you're an Eric Zawadzki, everyone assumes every Eric Zawadzki is you, because what are the chances there are two geeky people who have that such a weird name?
Well, thank you everyone for coming.
Thank you.